All right, good afternoon and welcome to Planning Council. I declare that we do have quorum, everyone's here, and I will ask Councillor Fitzgerald to read the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Chair Stone. I would like to respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe under the terms of the Robinson-Huron Treaty Number 61 of 1850 and the Williams Treaties of 1923. We commit to acknowledge, learn, educate, create opportunity, honor sacred places, and take actions toward real truth and reconciliation in support of our commitment to walking the path together in respect, peace, and harmony for future generations. Miigwech.
Thanks very much. I have a motion moved by Councillor Cloutier, seconded by Councillor Morrison. Be resolved that Planning Council meeting agenda dated June 12, 2024 be adopted as printed and circulated. All in favor? And that's carried. All right. I'd like to welcome everyone to the public portion of the meeting to consider applications to amend the Community Planning Permit Bylaw 2022-97 pursuant to Section 34 of the Planning Act. The procedure of the public meeting will be as follows. A brief explanation of the purpose and effect of the application and any correspondence received to date will be given by staff. The applicant or the representative will be asked to provide any additional comments without repeating the information already outlined by staff. Any members of the public present, in person or electronically, will then be permitted to ask questions or provide comments respecting the applications. Council will then have the opportunity to question the applicant, the planner, or anyone giving presentations. Once the public meeting is concluded, the input received and proposed amendments will be considered by Council. Any persons making representation are requested to first state their name and mailing address. Please note that presentations are limited to 10 minutes. Please be informed that an appellant must provide an oral submission at the public meeting or a written submission prior to the passage of the CPP bylaw amendment. Otherwise, the Ontario Land Tribunal may dismiss the appeal. If you wish to be notified of the passage of a bylaw, you must file either with the recording secretary or with the clerk a written request for notification prior to the passage of the proposed bylaw. Each notice of complete application and public meeting included an explanation of the purpose and effect of the proposed amendment, and notice was required to be posted at the subject lands. Notice was therefore considered to have been provided in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act and applicable sections of the Huntsville Official Plan. And with that, we are moving to our first item. Manager Richard Clark is going to speak to some housekeeping amendments.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to Council and all the public in attendance. The report before you describes staff recommended housekeeping amendments to the Community Planning Permit Bylaw, which, if approved, would be the second housekeeping amendment to the Community Planning Permit Bylaw. It deals with a total of 56 minor technical amendments, which have been summarized in the report. These amendments are related to matters previously described in an attachment to a report provided to Planning Council in September 2023, except for some additional matters raised by development applicants since that time. The amendments involve minor technical changes to the bylaw to improve implementation and facilitate further development streamlining. The proposed changes have town-wide effect. The housekeeping amendment was circulated in accordance with the Planning Act. We received comments from one member of the public, and aspects of the amendment were changed to address their concern. Their concern related to the removal of minimum lot area-based criteria for consideration of secondary residential dwelling units on smaller rural lots on private individual on-site septic and wells. Staff discussed the changes with the commenter, and it is understood that they were satisfied with the changes. District staff have no concerns with the proposed amendments. The proposed amendments are meet the intent of the official plan and are consistent with the provincial policy statement. As such, we're recommending approval of the amendments, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Thanks very much. So I will go to the members of the public present, if anyone would like to speak to this application, or these amendments. Welcome.
Well, good afternoon. John P. Gallagher, John P. Gallagher and Associates, 24 Hibbert Road, Huntsville, P1H, 1C9. I think staff have done a great job of dealing with these issues of the CPP, and I only have one item that I raise as a concern, and it would be noted in Part 2 of the bylaw, and it speaks to development associated with a new single detached dwelling addition and associated accessory structure or use that meets all the requirements, except a permit will be required if the buildings and structures are proposed within, and number 9 is 300 meters of a railway right-of-way and 1,000 meters of a railway yard. The issue I have with that is previously in the zoning bylaws, we had a 30-meter setback that was negotiated, and it was put in a number of iterations of the bylaw, and there were requirements for redevelopment within certain areas of those that setback. By arbitrarily putting in a 300-meter setback, and more importantly, they've now defined the train station as a railway yard. That takes in a swath of land from Burnell Road over at the high school over to Mobile Marine and down to Town Line. And in one of my applications that will hear some of the comments from CN, first they've asked for easements basically to negate liability for themselves, which takes away the public's right to object to anything they do. Further, they're suggesting putting in leases or offers to purchase comments from CN. I question how many staff members we'd have to hire at the town of Huntsville to look after their concerns. The 1,000-meter of a rail yard, again, I know this has been a sore spot for some people in this town after what happened in Quebec with the disaster there. I've been told in the past that some of the material that's stored in that rail yard is dangerous, and it should not be stored in the urban area of the town of Huntsville. Further to that, one of the items in our application, they're suggesting how you would build the building. It would have to be brick and this, that, and so much ICF, etc. And I don't think that that promotes additions to housing, secondary suites, small developments. I have no issue in requiring a noise and vibration study when there's a significant residential development adjacent a railway yard or a railway track. I think it just goes a little too far. And the thing with placing that policy from the official plan into the CPP is it is subjective. And even in their comments, they're saying that council could require it in the CPP. I would also suggest a rewording of section 2.25.1 with respect to rail yards, so it more reflects the previous zoning bylaw requirements that have been in there for years. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak to these amendments? I see no one here present. Is there anyone online?
Chair Stone, I see no hands raised.
All right, council members, any comments or questions? Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Chair Stone. I guess it's a really a question of the first person, John Gallagher, who just spoke. John, do you have proposed wording that you would recommend with respect to the your changes? Because you are reasonably supportive of, well, you are supportive of all of the other proposed changes in this document, right?
I think we could come up with some wording on that. You will notice in the previous zoning bylaws, there was some very specific wording, and I can provide that to staff that they can at least have a look at it and see if it suits their needs. But again, I agree that there will be times when it's needed. But for example, this committee severed a house on Town Line last meeting, I believe. They would have had to perhaps go through a noise and vibration, put an environmental easement on their property, all those things. And it's not a pick and choose thing. It either is or it isn't.
A quick
Go ahead.
follow-up, if
Yeah.
I may. I appreciate the response. And did you have a chance to speak to Richard before this, around this particular?
Briefly, I've been talking with Madeline because one of the applications for Dr. Hill, we've been going back and forth on this
that.
one, and I'll get into some of those. I just didn't want to take up too much time
Right,
here on this
okay.
one.
Thank you.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair Stone. I tend to agree with John's comments. I also have a bit of an issue with some of the numbers, and I don't know off the top of my head what the number was in the official plan before. 300 meters of a pit. We have a lot of pits that are inactive, a lot, in all of Muskoka. It seems to me that if we can be in 30 meters of operating or identified waste disposal site, why would we be 300 meters away from a sand pit? So I'd like to see that changed as well. What was it in the OP? Do you know, Richard?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. If I may. Sorry, I jumped the gun there. So these provisions that we're discussing right now are provision policies that are in the official plan. And of course, a bylaw like a community planning permit bylaw is required to implement the OP policies. So we do have provisions in the bylaw to implement those matters. Think of these as screening provisions. And what they do is they just basically are a pause. So if you are proposing development within one of those screening areas, then there is an additional question that's asked. And also keep in mind that we, through the first housekeeping amendment, we did include a provision that allows the Director of Development Services to deem a development minor. So we would waive development if it's minor from having to do any detailed work to address proximity to railway or to address proximity to pits and quarries, if indeed we thought it was minor. So I would just say that the provisions that are in place are appropriate because they're there because of corollary official plan policies, and that I wouldn't recommend any changes.
Did you have a follow-up?
I don't have a follow-up. Just a comment, I guess, that seems reasonable. It just seems to trigger another step in the process if we don't lessen the numbers. I think of everywhere I know where there's a pit that's inactive or has one loader loading sand in it, maybe 6 trucks a day. If you can't build within 300 meters without going through the process. So I guess I do have a follow-up. How long does that lengthen the process for those approvals from the director?
Richard?
Whoever would like to answer.
Anyone?
So if a study is deemed necessary, then it can take a month to do that kind of a study, and obviously there's cost. But what we would do before we actually say that there's a need for a study is evaluate the scale of the development, and figure out if that's actually warranted. There may be something that we could suggest doing, and that is looking at the provision for railways and railway yards, and just ensuring that there's discretion embedded within those policies so that we can evaluate the scale of development. And that might allay some of the concern that we're hearing.
Thanks for that, Richard. Just, I guess my fear is that if we have a number like 300 meters in there, it warrants a study in a month, which is expensive, and another month in the process. So if we're talking about a single residential home with possibly two other potential living accommodations on it, that seems like a very small but necessary and much required development in our community. It seems to me that we're limiting it by having that large number in there. So I'm not comfortable with it.
All right, I'm going to go to Councillor Cloutier first.
Through you, Councillor Fitzgerald certainly asked a lot of the questions that I was going to ask. I just, like, are we hindering the process here, or are we helping the process? We're supposed to streamline this for our developers and for the normal person building a home. Are we putting too much of a screen up for everybody, or is this, like, it's hard to understand here that we keep putting these roadblocks up in front for people when we're streamlining the process.
Richard?
Yeah, so these are great questions. So through you, Mr. Chair. So part of it is looking at what's being developed. So the first part of the provision is this going to be a sensitive land use? So one thing that we would do is if there's already a dwelling and it's an addition to a dwelling, we're not so concerned about those things. But if it's a new residential development, like a lot creation, then we would ask for these things. And as we know, proximity to rail lines, there are legitimate concerns about noise and vibration. There are often complaints that are received post-development if these measures aren't put in place. So the idea behind these policies is just to make sure when you are approving a new sensitive land use, that you've asked these questions and they've mitigated those impacts, so the new landowner who eventually purchases that property isn't going to be put out because of them. So that's the idea behind them. And that's all I think I can add with that, Monty.
Councillor Clark?
Thanks, Chair Stone. I couldn't agree more with Councillor Fitzgerald and Councillor Cloutier and John's comments. Richard, you say it promotes a pause, and I totally understand what you're saying about a pause. I also think it opens up the door to potential bureaucracy, more pitfalls, more costs, specifically costs to small developer who's trying to do a severance, trying to do an addition. So I disagree with the 300 meter for the CN Rail. I think it should be more focused on what we originally had in the old bylaws. And I know that you've got it in there as the 300 meters, you know, so that it allows it to be the most open and allows the most options for the building department to put a pause on things. But I just think it's too loosely worded, and it's too open-ended to allow the building department too much of a pause, and that's what I'm concerned about.
Deputy Mayor Armour?
Thanks, Chair Stone. Just a quick one, Richard. As I go through this, I can't disagree with my fellow councillors here, but I'm just curious. It doesn't mention whether it's active or inactive pits or quarries that I could see. So if you could just clarify, if it's an inactive pit and has been that way for many years, why would we have such a requirement of 300 meters?
So the language refers to licensed pits and quarries. So the idea being, if you have a licensed pit or quarry, you could operate at any time. So I think that's the explanation there. It's licensed pits and quarries. If that's the case, then the noise and vibration concerns could kick in at any time. Through you, Mr. Chair, if there's one thing I could suggest is this, I think we can deal with this matter. If it would be unfortunate to not proceed with this housekeeping amendment in light of this, we can definitely come back with a solution. We'll circulate it, make sure that people have a chance to comment on it. But what I would recommend is we deal with that as a separate matter, because there are a series of matters that we're hoping to get passed with this housekeeping amendment, and even a month delay would cause, I would say, development concerns in the town. So
you're suggesting we pass it as it is, and then you come back again? Thank you. Councillor Morrison.
Thank you, Chair Stone, through you. And I guess to that point, could we pull the items in question and pass the rest? That's something I'd like to know. A couple of concerns I have. One, I think I have a lot of faith in our current planning staff to look at the big picture when an application comes in. And I think they work with developers in the best way to make things happen. But 5 years down the road, it's a different planning staff, and maybe they have different outlooks, and it doesn't fit with the tone of what council wants. And with Councillor Clark, the more pauses we have, the more money it costs, the more time it takes. And if we're looking at some affordable housing initiatives, you're looking at a study needed, plus a peer review, and plus something else comes up from the peer review, and then you're 3-4 months in, and the houses don't get built. So I think that'd be the concern I would have. And I love the idea of a pause if it's absolutely necessary. So 30 meters from a train station, absolutely. 30 meters from a train track, absolutely. But when you say you would need a study if it's a new lot creation, that means that if someone is trying to sever a lot a kilometer away from a railway track, they would need a study. And I don't think that would make sense to me. That would just be too much. And you see everywhere it's getting rid of red tape, trying to get more housing built. So that's why I'd have a problem with it. And every time we add steps, it's also adding work to our staff. And, I think I don't want to add something in that's going to make it take more time for our staff and planning staff that are working for developers. So I'm fully in support of amending those while being sensitive to the fact that staff has valid reasons for why they want it in there.
Any other comments from council? Councillor Fitzgerald.
I guess just a question, and this is in response to Richard's comment about dealing with some current applications or files. What kind of turnaround time would we be looking at for you to bring this back to us?
So if I can get thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, if I can get a little bit of maybe more direction on what would satisfy council, I think I could bring it back at next planning council meeting in July. So what I would suggest is one thing we can do is look at both provisions, one for the railway yards and the rail line proximity, and the other for the pits and quarry proximity. And what I would suggest is that we just include discretion within both those provisions so that when we do get a development application, it doesn't automatically require studies, and staff would be able to review based on the scale and magnitude of development and determine whether or not a study is warranted. So take the word will require a study out of those provisions and insert the word may.
Thanks for that. Yeah. And again, just to emphasize, I look at all of the inactive, just Fowler pits and the magnitude and how many potential development applications that would stymie if that is in fact the case. So, and there's many more private ones as well. So I just want to proceed with caution there.
Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Chair Stone. So at this point, I'm wondering, we have the motion before us that includes everything, but there seems to be agreement that there are two things that could be pulled and you'll come back next month. On the other hand, you just talked about what you would replace it with, which was the worst use of the word discretionary, which seems like a pretty good way to deal with it. So I guess I'm asking where are we at today as to this decision going forward?
Richard?
Well, I guess we have options. My preferred option would be for us to proceed with the resolution. And maybe council could pass a resolution for us to look at these two provisions a little further and come back in July with a proposed amendment. The other option would be that we could amend the current motion that's on the floor to make those changes. But I would caution against that because it may be something we want to circulate to the public for comment.
Richard, do you need any more direction from council on these issues? Yes.
So I'm hearing that we should get a resolution for us to work on that and come back in July. But if council believes that or thinks what I'm suggesting would work, and I do think it would work, and I'll talk to Mr. Gallagher about it too, then I think I have enough direction.
Okay. All right. Councillor Morrison.
Just one comment. Do we have a planners roundtable meeting, Kirsten, between now and the next council meeting? In July, would it be beyond? Okay. I think Richard has a good relationship with the planners. He could bring them in on the conversation. I just want to make sure, and to your point of notifying the public, does that mean it would take another 3 months because of the circulation rules, or could it just have to be put out? I know with no print media, it's tough.
No, through you, Mr. Chair, it would just be, as long as we get our notice out by next week, we can meet the July timeline. So that's what we would aim to do.
All right. I'll read the resolution. Moved by Councillor Schumacher, seconded by Deputy Mayor Armour. Be it resolved that Planning Council approve Community Planning Permit Bylaw Amendment, CPPA 15-2023 HTE, amending Community Planning Permit Bylaw 2022-97 as amended to address implementation, improvement, and development streamlining as outlined in attachment number 1 to report DEV 2024-55. Any comments or questions? Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thanks, Richard, for the excellent report and your continued work on streamlining the CVP and getting it just right. So really appreciate it.
Other comments or questions? All those in favor? And that's carried. Do we need a resolution? All right. We will have another resolution about what we want to be brought back, but we're going to move on in the meantime. So Lisa is up and she's going to talk to us about the Garreau application.
Thank you, Chair Stone, and through you, the subject property for this application is located at 118 Liddell Heights Crescent. The property is within the Port Sydney Community Residential Community Settlement Area in the official plan and the Community Residential CR Precinct in the Community Planning Permit Bylaw. The property fronts onto and is accessed by Liddell Heights Crescent, which is a year-round municipally maintained local road. The purpose and effect of this application is to establish a motor vehicle and trailer repair operation within a new 140 square meter detached accessory building as a home business on the subject lands. An amendment to the community planning permit bylaw is required to change the precinct on the subject lands from community residential CR to community residential with exception to permit motor vehicle and trailer repair as an additional permitted accessory use within a 140 square meter detached accessory building on the lot. The application was circulated in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act and the CPP bylaw. 3 neighboring property owners submitted comments in objection to the application. One of those was included in the agenda, and the other two were received after the agenda was published, but circulated to the members of Planning Council ahead of today's meeting. Concerns raised include the potential for nuisance noise and visual impacts, contamination, increased traffic, lower property values, and the potential for future similar applications in the neighborhood. The provisions of approval recommended by staff address many of these concerns. On screen now, I have a photo of the front of the house from Liddell Heights Crescent. Here's a photo of the proposed building site facing northeast from within the property. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to advance just yet. Given the analysis of the town's policy and the proposal, the application would appear to conform with the intent of the official plan and be consistent with the provincial policy statement. As such, staff are recommending the application be approved. Finally, I have photos from the proposed building site facing southeast and southwest respectively towards the abutting neighboring properties. And I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, I'll call on the applicant or representative to make any comments. I see nobody jumping
Chair,
up. Is there?
Chair Stone, I do see one hand raised online.
All right.
I believe the applicant is present, and I'll now bring them into the meeting.
Hello, my name is Chad Garrow. I'm the owner of 118 Liddell Heights Crescent.
There you are.
I'm
Okay, we see you.
Hi. Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Chad Garrow. I'm the applicant for 118 Liddell Heights Crescent. I'm currently looking at building a small accessory building to do some part-time automotive repair and maybe some trailer repair. This is more going to be as kind of a semi-retirement thing for me. I've been in the automotive industry for almost 25 years, and I'm kind of looking to step back a little bit in the next short bit. And I have some other stuff as well that I do. So this isn't really going to be a full-time thing, but I would like to be able to do some work out of there legally, and kind of that's it for now, I guess.
All right, thanks very much. Let's take your camera off, but let's keep you with us in case there's questions.
Okay.
Would any member of the public wish to make any comment? Please come down, sir. Yeah, please. And if you can, that's no worries at all. We're all friendly. Well, some of us are.
My name is Gordon Zock. I'm at 145 Liddell Heights Crescent. And I'm in disagreement with this primarily because, well, to give you some background, we have the pit and we have the metal recycle noise. Okay, and I'm concerned about the noise that would be coming from an automotive repair sort of thing. The other thing I'm concerned with is in the summertime when there's say a fire ban, and we're working over there with impact wrenches, sledgehammers, like for need, torches, etc. There's no, I'm not aware of any way that they can go through with this, like use the torches through a fire ban, but it's not a fire, it's a tool. So if they're grinding and doing this and something gets off, there's 30 houses surrounding the exact center of where that building is in the forest. And that worries me.
All right. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Is there any other member of the public that would like to make comment? Come on down, sir. Welcome.
Thank you for taking the time to listen, councillors. I live as well in the Liddell Heights area. I live at the corner of Wood Street and Liddell Heights. And I have to agree with Mr. Zonk that this is not an area for commercialism in this type of thing. This area was built originally back in '74 on as a living residential area. It even has only one access in, and that's through Liddell Heights Crescent. The other streets, Northwood and Wood Street, and even Liddell Heights, all dead end. So there's only one access in and one access out of Liddell Heights. And I don't feel that we need to have whatever vehicles may be drawn in there to be worked on because of the traffic. We'll assume that the average house that lives in there now, and there are 29 homes in the Liddell Heights area. If these homes have traffic moving in and out, and they are young couples, a lot of them with children, I'm afraid we're going to have some problems, especially with, say, the bringing in trailers. I have towed trailers before, anywhere from 10 feet up to 65 feet. And I know what can happen when you start trying to take trailers into that kind of an area. The streets are not, they're residential streets, they're not highways, they're not county roads. And I don't think that we can actually have that kind of traffic coming in and out without having accidents happen. And especially I'm concerned with children because it is a residential area of a lot of young couples with young children. And children have a tendency just to do what they take an impulse feeling to do. So I'm very concerned with that. The other concern I have goes along with Mr. Zonk, and that is fire. I know it sounds funny to some people, but we live in a very heavy, dense area of bush. And if that bush ever catches fire, a fire will never be stopped because our fire equipment, although we have good stuff, is still only by water tank. And by the time they got a second tank of water from the lake up to the fire, if it was a bushfire, we can forget about putting it out. That means all the homes and all the bush area goes at the same time. And fires can be started quite easily in garages because they're using torches, they're using grinders, and any of these kind of pieces of equipment will cause a fire. And can the operator get the fire out before it takes hold?
All right. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else present that would like to speak to this? If you can come down here.
Hi, yes, my name is Terry Graham. I live at 13 Northwoods Drive, just a couple doors down from the subject property. A few things come to mind. First of all, the planning process, everybody was supposed to be notified. I know myself, we did not get a notification in our mailbox. So I'm going off a notification that some other people got. Anecdotally, I talked to some other neighbors and they said that they heard that people that should have been notified had not been notified with the flyer in the mailbox. So that seems to be a bit of a pitfall in the planning process right there. I would reiterate some of the things these two gentlemen said about noise, fire. The state of the roads in the area are quite terrible, so we're bringing in tow trucks, trailers and things like that. I don't know if you've been down that street, but there's literally rocks and logs sticking up. I know the town maintenance crews were pulling out rocks and stuff at an intersection. So the roads are terrible. They're not going to withstand any great heavy traffic. There are tons of children in this neighborhood. Reason why we moved to the neighborhood, because it was a residential neighborhood, not an industrial neighborhood. Kids run around all the time. Don't really see that compatible with people backing up trailers and bringing in tow trucks with vehicles. One thing, the size of the operation that Mr. Garreau mentioned would be part-time small. What if he changes his mind in the future? There's nothing to stop him from making it a large-scale operation. If you're given a business permit for a car garage that doesn't say you can work on 2 cars a week, you could work on 50 or 60 cars a week. Those 50 or 60 cars, where are they going to be on his property? It'd be an eyesore for the neighborhood. What if the property is sold in the near future? Does the new owner now have the right to do whatever he wants? A motor vehicle trailer, can he turn it into a manufacturing plant for trailers? What would be the parameters of that bylaw to say what else could be done on that property? I think that covers what my concerns are. And I know I think you said there was 3 people that submitted some information or submitted objections to it. I would say that there's probably nobody in the neighborhood that wants this kind of change to our basic neighborhood. So,
All right.
I don't know why they didn't put things in, but a lot of people are hesitant to pit neighbor against neighbor. Somebody asked for this, and it's like, well, I don't want to be the guy who says no or whatever.
All right. Thank you very much. Anyone else that would like to speak to this application? And if there's anyone online, you would need to raise your electronic hand.
Chair Stone, I see no hands raised.
Thank you. Before I turn it over to council, Lisa, can you speak to the restrictions that we're putting on this in respect to fire, noise, number of vehicles, expansion of the business and employees, that kind of thing?
Yes, thank you, and through you, Chair Stone. I don't have the recommendation in front of me, but I recall we had a restriction that work only be conducted within the structure. So I think that that would mitigate some of the fire concerns, also noise concerns. We also had included in that that only, I believe it was 3 vehicles could be worked on at the same time. No derelict vehicles are to be left outside of the accessory structure that's proposed. There is already screening on the property, but I believe I included further screening on the side yards just to make sure that there is enough visual screening. Thank you. It's flipped around. Yeah, so we also did put in there that it not be a nuisance with regard to noise, odor, dust, vibration. So, I mean, if there was a complaint with that, with regard to any of those, we have in the approval that it's not to be an issue. So we do have some form of like a way to address it through bylaw, I believe. And then, yeah, no derelict or unplated vehicles, no more than 3 vehicles located on the property at one time associated with this use. No repair occurring outside of the building, the vegetative buffer, 10-meter setback between all building structures and ancillary uses associated with the motor vehicle and trailer repair on all side lot lines. Only people residing within the dwelling can work at this operation, so we can't hire further staff. And just an unlit sign of no more than 0.5 square meters can be used to display the business.
Thank you for that. So I'll go to council. Any comments or questions? Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Chair Stone, and thank you, Lisa, for running through all of those conditions. Certainly, I think they do, as you said in your report, speak to a number of the concerns that were raised. And I appreciate sometimes it's hard to see a change like this in a neighborhood that you've lived in for a while. And it appears on the face of it to be different from what exists. The one thing that was also noted, though, in the report, that in the town's official plan, this is actually a permitted use. It's just looking at the specifics around the zoning itself, right, Lisa? The OP says this is a permitted use.
So, again, I don't have my report in front of me, but I believe Within, the OP
is a
designation, it is,
It
yes.
is a permitted use. So that's really what I wanted to speak to, that it's just the further definition. And I think it's really important that you've tried to address and have addressed many of I'd say all of the concerns that are raised by capping so many of the activities. As well, the buffer that's required around a very large lot, that's probably larger than most in that neighborhood. So for, I think, all of those reasons, I support this application. But I will say, to the concern that was raised about, well, if we approve this, what would stop the applicant or someone else from quadrupling or doubling the size of this business further down the road? Well, they would clearly they wouldn't be in compliance with the application that's before us today. And so that would be a huge problem if that happened. So that if someone did decide to double the size of the business, as I said, that would require a whole other application before this council.
Councillor Cloutier.
Through you, Chair. I understand the owner's want for this in the sense of to get into his retirement years or whatever and kind of, the backyard stuff, which is great. But I just find that who's going to police the 3 vehicles? Who's going to always have to do the calls? Who's going to have to make sure everything is in compliance at all times? I think that's going to come down to a cost. Even the neighbors look at it, then we have to go out there and, I'm sorry, like even park in my yard, I have more than 3 vehicles there, let alone being working. It's like, if he's got 3 there and then working vehicles and trailers, it is a neighborhood. And I just think if we approve this, we're going to upset a neighborhood that's nice small community down there as what we're told and always see, and I can't support this.
Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chair Stone. Just a couple, I guess my first question is, thanks, Lisa, for your report. How many hectares or acres is this particular property?
Sorry, thank you. And through Chair Stone, I just need to find it here. It should be in my report. I guess I've gone too far.
Well,
It's
you're
here
looking for
somewhere.
that. I'll just maybe.
Go ahead.
So Councillor Cloutier thinks it's 3.13 hectares? Acres, okay.
I did find the square meters if you want that.
No, that doesn't really mean much.
Okay.
So just looking at the drawing that was provided, I guess by the applicant here, so it's 68 feet setback approximately on the side yard and almost over 200 feet back from the road. So it's quite deeply offset off the road. I guess the one question I do have is to do with a sale. So if this were approved today, is the use permitted to a new owner? Or are we able to say, we'll approve the use for this current owner, but it won't be able to follow to a new owner?
Lisa?
Through you, Chair Stone. Thank you for the question. With the approval, the way that it is written now, it would continue on if the property was sold to any future owner. Again, only those living in the dwelling, whoever owned it at the time, would be able to operate the use. But I don't know of a way to restrict it to the current owner.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. So that concerns me a little bit, just because we kind of have an understanding of what's going to happen now with the property, but if it sells 5-10 years from now, there's really no indication of how it could be restricted, or So that bothers me a little bit, I guess, about the application. Thanks.
Councillor Renwick.
Thank you, Chair Stone, and through you to Lisa. Thank you for the report, and thank you to the members that came to speak against the proposal. When I look at it, and I think I concur with what the mayor has said, that with the stipulations that we put in place, I can't see that they have to abide by those bylaws, and it does address the noise bylaw and the fact that it's positioned where it is on the property. It's secluded, and I don't know if the owner is still listening, but it sounded as if he was looking at doing this as a hobby, that this is not going to be a full-time, like he's in the automotive industry, but he's doing this as a hobby, but something that he does on his property. It doesn't sound like it's a full-blown commercial enterprise where you're going to have trucks and cars, and you can't do that anyway. So given those stipulations or the fact that, it's secluded, it's not a full-blown commercial outlet. It's a hobby. It's a garage where, someone's doing car repair. That happens all the time. So I am in favor of this application, and I will support it.
Deputy Mayor Armour.
Thanks, Chair Stone. I can definitely understand the residents who live in the area and their concerns brought forward. But I think one of the key statements in this is that it fits in Huntsville's official plan. It's the Muskoka official plan, and it's consistent with the provincial policy statement. So he's crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's, and he's following the rules. He's coming here to ask for permission to do something. Unfortunately, we will have to police it somehow with bylaw, as Councillor Cloutier stated, but the neighborhood can always call ahead and let us know what's going on, and there will be multiple visits to ensure that he's following the rules. And if not, then we can revoke the rules. So with that being said, I'm in approval of it.
Councillor Schumacher.
Yeah, I know I'm torn listening to the comments today, because I grew up in the 70s when 2 brand new subdivisions were built in Port Sydney and one in Utterson, with the idea of residential and building that and moving forward. So I do understand where the residential component is coming from. I also see from this gentleman's idea of, I appreciate his comment, I want to do it legally, because I can probably name you 5 to 10 people in the Port Sydney Utterson area who fix lawnmowers in the garage, who fix, parts and things, and they're not doing it legally, they're doing it on the side. So I appreciate that he is coming forward to say that he wants to abide by our town bylaws and stipulations. I like that there are these extra amendments that you put in place, Lisa, because I think it does address the concerns. You heard the concerns from the community and you are addressing them. I agree with Councillor Cloutier. We'd have to police it, and Deputy Mayor Armour, because I don't want to pit neighbor against neighbor. I don't want neighbors to have to feel like they have to call and complain about each other. So we need to figure out a way of how we're going to police it if we pass this. Those are my comments.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair Stone. This is always a tricky situation. If there were 2 other businesses established on the R1 properties, then we probably wouldn't be having this discussion. He's the pioneer. He's the first one in the neighborhood that we know of anyway. I don't think there's any other ones that we're not aware of, but I read the objection letters, and I totally understand their objections, and I think we've addressed it in the proposed bylaw provisions, where the objectors, both being the neighbors on either side, will have the ability to contact bylaw, and whether it be noise or dust or more than 3 vehicles. And it seemed to me in the objection letters that the neighbors had an amicable relationship, regardless of whether this goes forward or not. I think what we have in place with the provisions will protect their concerns in the objection letters. I came in originally thinking that maybe I wasn't going to support this, but as you know, I always keep an open mind in the discussions that go around the table. More information comes out. So in this moment, I would like to support it and hope that the neighbors do work together cohesively and amicably. And if there is an issue, that they reach out to bylaw and we can resolve that issue for them. So I am going to support it.
Any other comments or questions? I'm afraid not. All right, I'm going to read the resolution. Moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Mayor Alcock. Be it resolved that Planning Council approve Community Planning Permit Bylaw Amendment Application CPPA 2024 HTE. The purpose and effect of which is to change the precinct on the subject lands from a community residential to a community residential precinct with exception, to permit motor vehicle and trailer repair in an additional permitted accessory use within a 140 square meter detached accessory building on the lot, subject to the provisions as listed in attachment number 4 to report DEB 2024-56. Any final comments or questions? All in favor? All opposed? And that carries. All right, Madeline is going to speak to the Hill application.
Good afternoon, everyone. Through you, Mr. Chair, the subject property is located at 30 Old Ferguson Road. The lot is designated both waterfront and rural in Huntsville's official plan and is under the waterfront backlot precinct with the natural constraints 1 and flood zone overlay in the community planning permit bylaw. A community planning permit bylaw amendment application was submitted to change the precinct on the lands from waterfront backlot precinct to a rural precinct and add a site-specific exception to increase the maximum gross floor area of a secondary residential dwelling unit within a detached accessory building from 75 square meters to 103 square meters. The property currently contains a single detached dwelling and various other accessory structures, and there is an existing equestrian establishment on the property. The waterfront backlot precinct limits the number of accessory structures, does not permit secondary residential dwelling units as of right, and only existing equestrian establishment facilities are permitted. The applicants wish to change the precinct on the property to rural, as the uses of the property and proposed development better align with this precinct. Within the rural precinct, there is no limit to the number of accessory structures, as long as lot coverage requirements are complied with, and both secondary residential dwelling units and equestrian establishment facilities are permitted as of right. Natural constraints 1 have been identified as stratum 1 deer wintering habitat, and the location of the proposed structure contains sparse vegetation and would only require limited clearing of select trees, so no impacts to deer habitat are expected. The flood zone overlay on the site is in the same location as the tributary, and the development, both existing and proposed, remains a significant distance away from the tributary and is located outside of the area of lands prone to flooding. The town may identify which properties should be within the waterfront designation based on proximity and criteria that includes a property's orientation towards the shoreline, having a visual connection, and having a use or structure that is associated to the waterfront. In this instance, it appears that the northwest corner of the property is within 150 meters of the shoreline of Lake Vernon, while the remainder of the property would be beyond this. Additionally, it appears that the property is not functionally or physically related to Lake Vernon, and it is not visible and separated by adjacent waterfront properties, the CN Railway, and Aspidin Road. As such, it would appear appropriate to treat this property under the rural designation. In this instance, the existing uses and location of the proposed development would be consistent with the rural designation, as it's generally characterized by low-density development in a natural setting. The application was circulated in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. One letter of objection was received in regards to the location of the proposed structure, and this was circulated to the applicants and council prior to the meeting. Both the CN Railway and Trans-Canada Pipeline provided comments which were included in the report package. In regards to CN comments, they have listed a number of items that the municipality should consider including in a development agreement. District staff noted no concern to the application, and through staff's review and analysis, the application appears to meet the intent of the official plan and be consistent with the provincial policy statement, and as such, staff are recommending approval. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much. I'll call on the applicant or the representative to make comment.
Good afternoon, John P. Gallagher again with Dr. Hill, and I'm here on behalf of Dr. Hill and his wife Julie. I think Madeline has explained the application quite well. She was quite helpful in dealing with the issues of CN in this regard. But I'd like to start back at the beginning. When Dr. Hill went to come and put a garage on his property, he found out that although it was a farm for 100 years and zoned rural since 1974, he all of a sudden had a waterfront backlot zone on his property, requiring the necessity of an amendment to the CPP right off the bat. And I was quite surprised that that was on there, given the nature of the property. That being said, we put in the application to allow for the garage with the living space above. Dr. Hill also wanted somewhere to park his tractor and have a little bit of a shop for himself. And in the future, whether him and his wife would be using that or perhaps seeing that as additional income down the road. The location of the property or of the garage is about 15 meters from the road and about 15 meters from the adjacent property. And it seems to meet all the regulations of the CPP with respect to the location. First, I want to talk about the comments from CN because I will talk about that letter of objection because I've got new information on that as of today that I wasn't aware of. Some of the concerns that I had with the CN comments had to do, number one, with the warning clause that they require on the properties, and then it turned into a warning clause for tenants on the property. And the comments say the council could do this and could do that, and that's why I thought it was important to bring this up at this meeting, because if we were just dealing with the zoning to put it back to the way it was, we would have staff making a determination, but it wouldn't be council's determination whether a noise and vibration study would apply, these environmental leases, and then what I would have to come back towards council if I disagreed with the direction of staff in that regard. Because some of the items that they're talking about, with this exterior provision of wall siding to be brick or masonry, acoustically upgraded windows, locating noise-sensitive rooms away from the railway line. The property is 200 meters from the CN easement. And so in that regard, I would ask that we not have the comments with regards to the noise and vibration and these requirements and the rental agreements, these clauses in favor of CN. With regards to the structure, Dr. Hill and his wife have designed a very nice looking building that'll fit into the area. Yeah, if you could, can I get that thing? Where's the fast forward? So, oh, there we go. Hold on, go back to the first. Sorry, there we go. Perfect. So that's generally the location of where we were proposing this building. You can see the neighbor to the west in the direction that they're looking at. Now, Dr. Hill and his wife did meet with them on site, and when they were looking at this area, it is a preferred location on the site because number one, it's close to the dwelling. Septic's just to the north of there, which would be easy to tie into that. The driveway's in front, and it would allow for a number of trees to be retained in that area. And there were 3 significant conifers that they wanted to retain. The site could obviously be buffered adjacent the side, but again, as people live now, they expect an instant buffer, and these things do take time. With regards to the application, we're looking at zoning it to allow for this habitable space above the garage and put it back to the way it was into the rural zone. We're not asking to reduce our setback adjacent the neighboring property or the front yard, et cetera. And so I think in that regard, we would like that to proceed. One of the reasons why we picked that site was because over in this location here, we have a water line, we have the hydro line running into the building, the septic's over here. However, if we turn the page, thank you, Madeline. We could consider this, but we will have to work with staff. Right now, there's a little garage building here. You've all seen it. It's right out the road. And again, if they could move it over into this location where we were proposing, the concern of the neighbor had to do with the visuals of people living in that, sort of looking down upon them and their home over there. This would allow the property to have the view to the back. There would be probably some significant work involved in tying in a new hydro line, feeding the building, and then subfeeding this, moving a water line. Dr. Hill and his wife are prepared to look at that, but we really don't want to get things held up on this application because this application is requesting it to be put on the lot, and we are meeting the setbacks for the zone. And why I say that is he probably could have the right today to go put a large structure up in that location without having to come to council for approval of that. We do meet the setbacks. What I will say is that we are prepared to review this area and look at appeasing the neighbor because again, Dr. Hill and his wife, they live there with their neighbors and their friends, and they want to work with them to proceed. But I will say that having to zone this back to rural has taken a significant amount of time already. And I guess if, I would say that that's basically, we definitely would look at that option of shifting it over to that area there if it were a major concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak to this application? I see none. Council members, comments or questions? Councillor Morrison.
Thank you, Chair Stone, and through you. Mr. Gallagher, if you can explain to me the distance that there would be between the new building and the neighbor's house, and tying to that on the drawing, I assume that little area, rectangular area that's got the lines on it, would that be the deck? Is that where the deck would be facing? So the distance and where the deck is.
So can you throw that on the screen?
Can we have it shown on the screen?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
It's currently showing.
Yep. Did you want this photo?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
It's not here? Oh, okay, there we go. Can we zoom in a bit to this one? So, oh, sorry. Perfect. Oh, great. Thanks, Madeline. Yes, so the distance over here, again, we were in the neighborhood about 25 meters away. We have to be a minimum of 5.5 meters from the dwelling, as well as we have to be back from the septic 5 meters.
Madeline?
Sorry, through you, Chair Stone, just to address your comment. The hatched area that was shown on the other drawing, I believe that's a carport, not a deck. But maybe,
Oh,
John, if
that's
you want.
correct. It's actually a tractor port.
Oh, there you go. Sorry, I just didn't want to miss that.
Yes, and that, and so the driveway was here, so you can see this existing garage over here. So there could be a possibility of coming, there's a 12-meter setback, so it gets fairly tight on trying to fit it in this area because of the curvature of the road as well.
A follow-up?
I'll just follow up, based on what you've told me there, I always think of the impact on neighbors, and that matters a lot. I don't think this building will have a negative impact on neighbors. So I think I can support it. But the one question is, we don't know the exact use of what Dr. Hill and his wife would want to use it for. It wouldn't be short-term rental, would it?
Application is for long-term rental or use as our family. I'm sure the kids are gonna take over the house and we're gonna be there. That's what happens when you retire.
I do have a question about the old, looks dilapidated garage. Is that going to stay?
Well, if we did the switch, I was really just looking at it this morning and yesterday with the family because John and Betty had concerns about where it was going. I think it works well where we've been proposing, but we'd like to consider the other option. There's some tweaking, I think, but the old building, we would have to sacrifice its position there to accommodate the new one. We still like it. It's a 100-year-old garage, and me being a fiddler, I might just dismantle it, put it up around the timber frame and put it over where the woodshed is right now, where the proposed building is that we would go, like, it works well for garden tools and garden stuff, and we don't want to necessarily lose that. But if we relocated the building, that would definitely be moved or demolished or.
Thank you. Councillor Renwick.
Thank you, Chair Stone. And if I may, just because those two photographs were not included in the package of where the building was going to be, so what we're looking before us today, are we looking at the position of the dwelling in the first position or the second one? And
John?
yeah,
We're looking at the position where it is, but primarily we're looking at the use to allow it because in the waterfront backlot, we aren't allowed it as a right, whereas the rural was allowed as a right.
Thanks. Madeline?
Yeah, I think I will just add we're not so much focused on where the location of that proposed structure is going. It gives us reference on, what we are approving for what may potentially be on the property. However, the application before us today would just be to change the precinct on the property as well as permit that structure, the dwelling unit space, to be larger than what's permitted. But we will be working with both the applicant and owner to position that building appropriately on the lot.
if I may, just a follow-up to
Go
that.
ahead.
In regard to the CN report that came through, there seemed to be quite stringent regulations about, the side, the windows facing, and so how are you going to address those concerns, John?
Well, again, if you, or I don't know whether you were privy to the email, the CN planner basically said that they could be included in the city. So I'm asking that the council not include it. Secondly, I think to add on to what Madeline was saying, here we are doing the zoning portion. We will have to come back and do the siting portion. And I think that's what Dr. Hill and his wife are saying. We're willing to look at that in our siting because we're meeting the setbacks. We're not asking to reduce any setbacks, but we understand the concerns of the neighbor.
Perfect. Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thanks, Chair Stone, and I couldn't agree with you more about the CN shall and may and must, and it just seems onerous to me. We did have a few issues with precincts and backlot waterfront issues popping up, and in a real world scenario, we're not perfect, so it happens. And there are a few more cases, and I'm sure that when we do some housekeeping, we can fix a few of them up, but this is when we become aware of them. So I'm happy to support the rezoning.
Madeline?
Sorry, I do want to clarify that under the old zoning bylaw, the property was rural 2, and majority of those properties did translate over into the waterfront backlot precinct. So just a clarification on that.
I see no more hands. Moved by Councillor Renwick, seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. Be it resolved that Planning Council approve Community Planning Permit Bylaw Amendment Application CPPA 10 2024 HTE. The purpose and effect of which is to change the precinct on the lands from a waterfront backlot precinct to a rural with exception precinct to increase the maximum permitted gross floor area of a secondary residential dwelling unit within a detached accessory building from 75 square meters to 103 square meters. Comments or questions? All in favor? And that's carried. All right. Rocketing along. Madeline, you're going to speak to the one on Lake Drive.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Stone, the subject property is located at 11 Lake Drive. The lot is designated urban shoreline residential within a boathouse prohibited area within the Huntsville's urban settlement area in Huntsville's official plan and is under the urban residential shoreline precinct with the natural constraints 1 and 2 overlay in the community planning permit bylaw. A community planning permit bylaw amendment application was submitted to change the precinct on the lot from urban residential shoreline precinct to an urban residential shoreline with exception precinct to permit a short-term rental accommodation in the second story of a 45 square meter legal non-conforming and non-complying boathouse. As discussed and outlined within the report, the second-story boathouse proposed to permit the short-term rental accommodation was constructed prior to the town having a zoning bylaw or a community planning permit bylaw in place, classifying it as both a non-conforming use due to the use and non-complying due to its projection into Fairy Lake, being developed within Type 1 fish habitat, encroachment into the east interior side yard setback for both the boathouse itself and the flat roof boathouse portion, height, number of stories, containing a dwelling unit, and being within, I just lost my place. And being an additional roofed structure on the lot. Present-day policy would not permit a boathouse on this property, nor permit a boathouse to be greater than 4 meters in height, have a second story, or contain a dwelling unit. Additionally, the attached boat port with seating above would not be permitted as of right and would be required to maintain a double interior side yard setback to ensure privacy is maintained between neighboring properties. In this instance, no changes to the existing structure are being proposed. However, allowing the expansion of use to commercial within this structure would further the nonconformance and aggravate the existing situation. It should also be noted that during a site visit, it was discovered that 2 floating dock sections had been added off the attached boat port without benefit of a planning or building permit application. And the owner has been notified this, and the docks are required to be removed. The urban residential shoreline precinct permits short-term rental accommodations as an accessory use. Further, the community planning permit bylaw defines short-term rental accommodations as the commercial use of a single detached dwelling that may be rented for up to 30 consecutive days as a temporary accommodation and must be licensed appropriately with the town of Huntsville. Both the short-term rental accommodations bylaw and community planning permit bylaw work together to effectively license and regulate short-term rental accommodations. A short-term rental is only permitted within a single detached dwelling and is further limited to an entire dwelling or up to 2 bedrooms in an owner-occupied home and shall not use any other form of residential dwelling. Natural constraint mapping has identified Fairy Lake as being a cold water lake, the shoreline being type 1 fish habitat, steep slopes on the property, and flood-prone mapping. Boathouses and boat ports are not permitted as of right within type 1 fish habitat as they are disruptive to this sensitive feature. And additionally, development adjacent to cold water lakes within the settlement area should be set back a minimum of 20 meters. Policies further state that dwelling units or sleeping cabins will not be permitted within or over boathouses and limit such structures to 1 story in height. Floodplain mapping for Fairy Lake has also been provided by the District of Muskoka, and based on mapping, it appears that the portion of the property where the boathouse is located is shown to be within flood-prone lands. In regard to housing and the shortage of available long-term rental stock in Huntsville, the official plan anticipates that varied size, density, and tenure of housing should be retained. In this instance, the existing dwelling unit within the boathouse may be suitable for longer rental periods rather than on a short-term rental basis. The application was circulated in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. 2 letters of support and 1 letter of objection were received from neighboring property owners and included in the report package. An additional comment was received as well as an objection to the application. Both were circulated to council and the applicants prior to the meeting. The comments of letters of objection generally discuss parking, the concern that both the dwelling and the boathouse will be used for short-term rental purposes, and just the use in general. The Fairy Lake Association also provided comments which were included in the report package. And through the building department's review, it was identified that based on site and aerial photos, alterations to the existing boathouse structure were completed without the benefit of a building permit. So the proper building permits would be required, and the owner has been made aware of this. And district staff noted no concern to the application. So through staff's review and analysis, the application does not appear to meet the intent of the official plan, nor be consistent with the provincial policy statement, and as such, staff are recommending denial. Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much. I'll call on the applicant or representative. I see the representative.
Good afternoon, Savas Ferdas, Plan Muskoka Inc., P.O. Box 5384, Huntsville, Ontario, P1H 2K7. I'm here representing the applicants who are also present. Ms. Truesdale is behind me, and she wishes to speak after I give my short presentation here as well. I guess just to start, there probably should be some background as to where this application came from. So it's my understanding, based on discussions with the applicant, that they have used this boathouse as a short-term rental prior to the STR bylaw coming into effect, and for some time. At that point in time, they attempted to apply to get a license to continue using this legally. They were denied because the stipulation in the bylaw states that an STR has to be in the principal dwelling on a property. This is a legal non-conforming dwelling. It's not like a bunkie above a boathouse. It actually is a fully functioning dwelling, and it has existed there since 1927. So it's, but because of the size of it being less than in area than the actual dwelling itself, staff have taken the opinion that it is not the principal use of the land, so therefore the STR could not be within that with that building, and therefore this application was made. In the meantime, how it happened is the applicants applied for and obtained a license for an STR in their dwelling on the property. That is a 4-bedroom home. It's a, I guess, more intensive STR use than what is being proposed here today. And just to make it clear, they're not proposing to add a second STR to this property. They're looking to transfer the STR use that they're permitted in their dwelling into the boathouse. So the effect of this application would not be to, increase the usability of the property from an STR perspective. It actually would be to reduce the intensity of the STR use on the subject lands. I understand staff's opinion on the application. The boathouse is a legal non-conforming land use, but it is legal non-conforming. As I said, it's been there since 1927. It has the ability to be reconstructed and continue to be used as it currently is, and it will continue to have that right whether this application is denied or not. In terms of fish habitat, there is no proposed development proposed for this property. So there's no expansion, no physical change being proposed from this boathouse. So the effects on fish habitat as they exist today will continue to exist today. And this isn't, I don't believe the use of this as a STR will have any effect on type 1 fish habitat or fish habitat as a whole. In terms of when comparing it to what is already permitted on the property, having a 4-bedroom home used as an STR could potentially be seen as more impactful, because then you have 8 people coming to the dock versus the 2 as being proposed with this application. So I don't really agree with, in terms of environmental impacts, the statements made by staff, but again, I understand where they're coming from and that their hands are tied to a degree. In terms of the mentioning of the dock being expanded illegally, as being noted by staff, the applicants have been made fully aware of that. They didn't understand that floating docks had the same sort of requirements for building permits as permanent docks. So we are being instructed to take care of that and to take care of that matter. They've been shown as being removed for now on the plan, and that's how they will be until otherwise dealt by permit or by approval, by Planning Act approval. So I don't really see this application as an introduction of a land use. I don't see it as an expansion to the use of the non-conforming boathouse. You'll hear from Ms. Truesdale that they use it as a guest room, and as I said earlier, they've also used it as an STR prior to it being prohibited from being used that way. So I feel the application is a little more straightforward, I think, than it may appear on paper, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that council may have, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Truesdale. Thank you.
Thanks very much. We'll have the applicant come down.
Hello, everyone. My name is Emma Trousdale, and I live at 11 Lake Drive, which is the subject property. I trust that you all read the letter that I sent that was included in the application, so I'm not going to repeat all of those things, but I did want to come here today and just tell you in my own words why we're applying for this amendment. Before the new STRA bylaw came in, we were happily living in our home and occasionally renting out the existing dwelling unit in the top of our boathouse to singles, couples. We've rented to the occasional nurse, professionals that come up to Huntsville to work. We live on our property and we've never had any issues. As I said, we just rent to singles and couples. We can see the boathouse from our house. Our neighbors are happy. And then the STRA bylaw came in, and we all of a sudden were told that we couldn't continue that. So that's why we're here today. Because we do rely on that income for our family, we, in the meantime, we got a license to rent out our home. So for 5 or 6 weeks of the summer, my family of 4 will be moving to the boathouse and renting our house out to up to 8 people, which quite frankly seems kind of nonsensical, because we want to live in our house and rent out our boathouse to 2 people. We don't want to live in our boathouse and rent out the house to 8 people. We're not asked, to be clear, we're not asking for 2 licenses. We already have a license in good standing. We just want it to be in the boathouse, not in our house. A few key points I just want to mention. We're not asking to change anything, build anything. Like, the property's been there, as Sava said, since 1927. Our neighbors on both sides of us are in support of this. They sent letters in. We have a great relationship with them, and in fact, they would prefer that we continue to use the boathouse in this way rather than our house, because I think you can understand If you were a neighbor, you wouldn't want 8 people, you'd rather 2 people with the owners on site. We can't use, like, I'm super sensitive to housing issues in Huntsville. We can't really offer the boathouse as a permanent housing for a few reasons, mainly because we use it. It's our guest room. Our house isn't really very big. We use it a lot. Also, in February, I wouldn't feel comfortable having a permanent renter in the boathouse. It's technically winterized, but it wouldn't be comfortable. What else? The cold water fish habitat was mentioned by staff, and again, I consider myself an environmentalist, and I care a lot about Fairy Lake. I actually think that this is a strong reason why you should allow us to do this, because there will be less people on our property. Ultimately, there will be renting to 2 people, not 8 people. So, again, we're not planning any construction, so my understanding is that construction is one of the big concerns for fish habitat, and we're not proposing any construction. The boathouse has been there since the early 1900s, and it seems, I mean, I don't know, but it seems that it's been used as a guest room, guest house for many, many years. I think that's all I have. I'm here to answer any questions. Thanks so much for considering my application.
Thank you very much. I will go to members of the public who would like to speak to this application. I see nobody jumping up. Anyone online?
Chair Stone, I see no hands raised.
All right. Members of council, comments or questions? Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chair Stone. So just some comments. I'll admit, when I first read through this report, my initial reaction was, I agree with staff on this. But as I continued to read through the report 2 or 3 times, I think I'm coming to maybe a point where I'm willing to open my mind to a different option on it. There would be some positives, I think, if this were approved. So firstly, the applicants have agreed to take care of some non-compliant docking, so that would be looked at. Also, by reassigning the short-term rental license to the boathouse, as the applicant mentioned, we'd be looking at less occupancy of the property as opposed to what is currently being offered there now. Also, the boathouse is not 4 seasons, so again, lesser occupancy rate. And as long as the boathouse is hooked up to proper sewers, there shouldn't be an issue there. And on a final comment, I think I read the letter from the Fairy Lake Association mentioned that there should be some kind of study involved with to confirm with the hookups. And I would just like to say, I would disagree with having the applicant spend any money on any kind of large, expensive study to verify that, because I think that's something that should be easily verified.
The boathouse is connected to town water.
Just 1 second.
Yeah.
Any other comments? Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thanks, Chair Stone. And after reviewing the file and discussing it with the planner and the applicant, it seems to be a little bit of a common sense thing. I don't like the fact that we're going to permit it in a boathouse, but it seems to me the impact is going to be less. And the concerns that were voiced by the Lake Association and generally STRAs in general, it doesn't add up. So I think for common sense, I understand staff's position. They have to take that position, but I think I could support it as well.
Thanks. Deputy Mayor Armour.
Thanks, Chair Stone. Just that, I agree with my fellow councillors on this. I think it's an opportunity for us to maybe test the waters on this. As you say, they used to rent them out, and then we come in with their bylaw and we pull them all out. So there's going to be 2 less cars in your driveway, I would imagine, right?
Correct.
More parking area. And there'll be a couple of happy people, probably couples, enjoying our wonderful lake of Fairy Lake. So I can go along with it. I can, for sure.
Mayor Alcock.
I guess I'm echoing what has already been said. I thought that Councillor Clark summarized exactly where I was going, which is at the end of the day, there are some real positives around this application. And the inclination, of course, and I understand why staff, recommended what it did because of our policy. But it's one of those situations where I think the application kind of gets caught. You had a situation and then we came in with our policy and that sort of, that has an immediate impact. I also appreciate the fact that that the docks that are non-compliant will be removed. I think that's good. And so there's a positive outcome, and for all of the reasons that were mentioned, so I would be in support of this application.
All right, well, I'll entertain a motion, an
I'd like to
amendment.
put a amendment on the floor to approve with the current restrictions in place of removing the docks, et cetera.
Okay. All right, I'm going to read the original motion. Moved by Councillor Fitzgerald, seconded by Councillor Renwick. Be it resolved that the Planning Council deny Community Planning Permit Amendment Application CPPA 14-2024 HTE. The purpose and effect of which is to change the precinct on the lot from an urban residential shoreline precinct to an urban residential shoreline with an exception precinct to add a short-term rental accommodation within the second story of a 45 square meter legal, non-conforming, and non-complying boathouse as an additional permitted accessory use. That was the original motion. I have an amendment. Moved by Deputy Mayor Armour, seconded by Councillor Clark. Be it resolved that the following word, deny, be struck out and the word approve be inserted in its place. And further, that the phrase, provided there are no short-term rental accommodations on the lot, be inserted after the words, permitted accessory use. I might add that there's no indication about bringing the dock into compliance. Do we need that? Madeline?
Sorry, through you, Chair Stone. So we can't add conditions to an amendment. However, it has been recognized as a non-conformance. So it is something that the owners are obligated to do.
All right. All right, well, you've heard me read the amendment. All in favor to the amendment? And that carries. And all in favor of the main motion as amended? And that's carried. Madeline, we're moving on.
Thank
You're
you.
speaking to the Penn Lake Point.
Thank you, Chair Stone. And through you, the subject property is located at 95 Penn Lake Point Road. The lot is designated recreational resort residential within the Hidden Valley Special Policy Area in Huntsville's official plan and is under the recreational resort residential precinct with a natural constraints 2 overlay in the community planning permit bylaw. On January 30th, 2024, provisional approval was granted by the Director of Development Services for the creation of one new recreational resort residential lot. The proposed severed lands were provisionally approved to have an area of approximately 1.2 hectares and 63 meters of frontage on Peninsula Lake. The proposed retained lands were provisionally approved to have an area of approximately 1.1 hectares and 64 meters of frontage on Peninsula Lake. Upon completing surveys to fulfill conditions of provisional approval, it was recognized that the lot area of both the severed and retained lots were slightly under the required size. Both lots are required to have an area of at least 1 hectare or 10,000 square meters. Based on the survey, the proposed severed lot has an area of 9,068 square meters, and the proposed retained lot has an area of 9,504 square meters. The application before you today was submitted to address this matter. The proposed community planning permit bylaw amendment is to change the precinct on the lands from a recreational resort residential precinct to a recreational resort residential with exception X precinct and exception Y precinct to recognize the corresponding lot areas of both the proposed severed and retained lots to be compliant for the purposes of this bylaw. Minimum lot requirements for new recreational resort residential properties are 1 hectare on private services and 30 meters of frontage abutting a watercourse. Both the severed and retained lots are meeting the required frontage, however, are slightly deficient in the required lot area. Notwithstanding this, both the lots appear to be of a suitable size to accommodate the proposed and existing uses and development. In the official plan, new shoreline recreational resort residential lots are required to have a minimum lot area of 1,400 square meters and a minimum shoreline frontage of 30 meters. In this instance, both the severed and retained lots meet the intent of the official plan designation while maintaining the character of the surrounding area. Natural constraint mapping has identified sloping, type 2 fish habitat along the shoreline, and Peninsula Lake being both a cold water lake and an at-capacity lake trout lake. The area for the proposed development on the severed lands is sited on a flat portion of the property where the risks of steep slopes are avoided. To mitigate impacts to fish habitat, the proposed building envelope on the severed lands will be 30 meters away from the shoreline, which also ensures that an appropriate shoreline buffer can be maintained. And additionally, Peninsula Lake has been verified by the province of Ontario as being an at-capacity lake trout lake. Policies discuss that lot creation will not be permitted unless new leaching beds for each lot will be set back at least 300 meters from the shoreline of the lake and require lots to be at least 0.8 hectares in size. In this instance, the applicants are able to meet these requirements and have conducted a lake capacity review, which was prepared by Riverstone. The report explains that the proposal would be an improvement for water quality based on existing conditions due to replacing and upgrading septic systems and proposing a new septic system on the severed lands in a suitable location. The application was circulated in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. One letter was received just before the meeting and was circulated to council. The letter requests that the application be deferred to address the right-of-way that is used to access the property. In this instance, the subject lands have a right-of-way registered on title, and these same rights would be transferred to the severed lands, and therefore staff do not feel that any further planning considerations are required to address these comments. District staff has noted no concern to the application, and through staff's review and analysis, the application appears to meet the intent of the official plan and be consistent with the provincial policy statement. As such, staff are recommending approval. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'll call on the applicant or representative to make any comments. Come on down. Good afternoon. Yep.
Hello, my name's Tracy Zalkowski. I'm the owner with my husband Daryl, and nervous as you can see. So we purchased this property last year, and we've been residents here for 14 years and moved here back onto water last year. We were quite surprised when we purchased the property that a few things didn't quite match up to what we thought we were purchasing, which again, the property is 84 years, so that's going to happen. Since then, planning staff has been fantastic in helping us take all these little twists and bends in the roads of what's being put in front of us. Number one, which may address the letter that just came in before the meeting, the right-of-way issue that was brought up there. Everything has been re-registered with the Land Registry Act, and that was finalized this year, and that was a condition of our closing agreement. So I can understand, reading that they had that question that, is this actually a legal right of way? And yes, it is. And that's, as Madeline said there, I think should address that concern. On that, we really appreciate this opportunity, and I'm here for any questions, and
Perfect.
I'll just,
That's plenty. Thank you. All right. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak to this application?
Chair Stone, I see no hands raised.
Council members, comments or questions?
Sorry, Chair Stone, just a point of order. We did receive one additional set of public comments just before this item was heard. So we'll send that to you, but in the meantime, if you'd like, I could read the gist of those comments.
Sure, if it can be summarized, yeah.
Okay. So these comments were provided by, it looks like a individual who lives near the subject property. The concerns they raise are related to lot area requirements and the fact that this is smaller than the lots that are being created would be smaller than what is required in the precinct for the lot. They're also raising that the reduction in size would impact community character. They're noting that this would create a precedent for future exceptions if this was approved. And they're noting that there's a lack of comprehensive impact assessment conducted for this proposal. And what they refer to in specifically are potential impacts this amendment could have on local infrastructure, traffic, and public services. So they're suggesting that these issues be considered seriously and that the application be denied.
All right. Thank you for that. A short comment? Yes.
I'm sorry. If I may say on that note, in the course of this past year, it came to light that actually the property with what we are doing now will better everything there. It came to light there were 3 septics over the course of the last 80 years that are all, we have no idea the age of them, as there were no permits on file for them. We will be, as Madeline said there, through Riverstone, 2 new septics will be installed well back from the water, as the new property will also be built well back from the water. We'll definitely keep in character with what is currently there. We're not interested, or we're not planning, as we've already submitted what we propose to build. There's not going to be some gigantic clearing or huge building on the land. We are maintaining the character, we are maintaining the buffer, everything that we are trying to accomplish in keeping with bringing back the character of the, I call her the old gal that's there, the cottage, existing cottage already. So that's
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions from council? I see none. Moved by Mayor Alcock, seconded by Councillor Clark. Be it resolved that Planning Council approve Community Planning Permit Bylaw Amendment Application CPPA 17-2024 HTE, the purpose and effect of which is to change the precinct on the lands from a recreational resort residential precinct to a recreational resort residential with exception X precinct and a recreational resort residential with exception Y precinct to permit the following. Exception X is deem the lot area of 900 9,504 square meters to comply. And exception Y is to deem the lot of 9,068 square meters to comply. Comments or questions? All in favor? And that carries. All right, Madeline, you're speaking to the Hoodstown Road application.
Yes, thank you, Chair Stone. So through you, the subject property is located at, oh, there we go, 27 Hoodstown
Sorry,
Road.
just one second.
No problem.
It appears we need a break, so.
Oh, sure.
So we'll be back in 10 minutes. All right, we're back. Madeline, thank you for pausing.
No
You
problem.
can hit play.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Stone. And through you, the subject property is located at 27 Hoodstown Road. The lot is designated rural in Huntsville's official plan and is under the rural precinct with the natural constraints 2 overlay and previous site-specific exception in the community planning permit bylaw. The community planning permit bylaw amendment application was submitted to change the precinct on the lands from rural to rural residential with exception X precinct and delete previous zoning exception RU10509 and change the rural precinct to rural with exception X on the lands. And exception X is to deem Hoodstown Road to be the front lot line and prohibit development until such time as appropriate development control techniques to mitigate negative impacts on deer wintering habitat are implemented to the satisfaction of the town of Huntsville through a community planning permit bylaw. Sorry, community planning permit. A concurrent consent application was submitted for the creation of 1 new rural residential lot. The severed lot would have an area of approximately 2 hectares with 135 meters of frontage, and the retained lands would have an area of 17.9 hectares with 237 meters of frontage. And the standard conditions of consent have been included in this instance, with the addition of the community planning permit bylaw amendment being approved and the requirement for a District 5126 agreement to address the location of wells. One thing I will also note is that you may be familiar with this property as there was in the past a proposed telecommunications tower on the lands. The owners have confirmed that that agreement with Bell has been since terminated and that a telecom tower is not being installed on the property. So that will not be affecting this application. The amendment to change the precinct from rural to rural residential on a portion of the property would permit the smaller lot size for the proposed new lot. New lots within the rural residential precinct are required to have a minimum frontage of 135 meters on a Class B district road, that being Hoodstown Road, and a minimum lot area of 2 hectares. Both the severed and the retained lands would meet this minimum frontage and area requirements for both the rural and rural residential precincts respectively. The rural residential precinct would also reduce the variety and number of permitted uses when in comparison to the rural precinct to primarily low-density residential. Additionally, the severed lands have 34 meters of access along Hoodstown Shores Road, and the retained lot has 38 meters of access on Ravenscliff Road. Based on the definition of lot line in the community planning permit bylaw, the shorter public street would be deemed to be the front lot line. Therefore, an exception is being added to the lands to deem the front lot line to be along Hoodstown Road for both the severed and retained lots. The proposed rural residential lot is in keeping with the new rural residential lot requirements contained within the official plan. A natural constraint mapping has identified deer wintering stratum 2 and sloping on the property. Steep slopes on the property are primarily located within the southern portion of the retained lands and do not appear to be a concern in regard to slope protection. Both the severed and retained lots contain deer wintering habitat, and to ensure protection of this habitat, a section has been included in the site-specific exception which will prohibit development until such time that appropriate development control techniques to mitigate negative impacts to deer wintering habitat are implemented. The application was circulated in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. One letter from a member of the public was received and included in the report package. District staff provided comments which were included in the report package, and their conditions have been addressed through the consent condition and site-specific exception. The operations department provided comments stating that a site inspection has been conducted, and it's been confirmed that the proposed entrance off of Hoodstown Shores Road for the proposed severed lot is feasible. And through staff's review and analysis, the applications appear to meet the intent of the official plan and be consistent with the provincial policy statement, and therefore staff are recommending approval. Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much. I see John headed down again.
Good afternoon. I will keep it brief, seeing I'm hogging a fair bit of time here. I think Madeline has explained the application quite well. Casey and her husband are looking at severing off a lot, and this was in the old Hoodstown area, the original town site of Huntsville. Unfortunately, the Bell lease did not go through properly, and with that, they felt that they needed to provide another residential opportunity for someone in Huntsville to build a house on. It is in an area of other similar lots. There's new construction going across the street right now. And prior to proceeding with the application, Peter Rossbottom, Casey's dad, met with Michael from Public Works to ensure that we could get the access off the Hoodstown Shores Road. I'd be glad to answer any questions should you have any. Thank you.
Any members of the public that would like to speak to this application?
Chair Stone, I see no hands raised.
Thank you for that. Council members, comments or questions? All right. Moved by Deputy Mayor Armour, seconded by Councillor Renwick. Be it resolved that Planning Council approve Community Planning Permit Bylaw Amendment Application CPPA 19, 2024 HTE. The purpose and effect of which is to change the precinct on the lands from a rural precinct to a rural residential with exception precinct and delete previous zoning exception RU1-0509 and change the rural precinct to a rural with exception X on the lands. 2, deem Hoodstown Road to be the front lot line, and prohibit development until such time is appropriate development control techniques to mitigate negative impacts on deer wintering habitat are implemented to the satisfaction of the town of Huntsville through a community planning permit. Comments or questions? All in favor? And that's carried. All right, thanks, Madeline. That was a lot. Kelsey, you're speaking to the Faith Baptist Church application.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, the subject property is located at 172 West Road. The property is within the urban residential designation of the official plan and within the urban residential low precinct with site-specific exception C31677. The applicant is seeking to establish a private park and an institutional parking lot with 83 parking spaces. The proposal requires a bylaw amendment to change the precinct on the lands from urban residential 1 low to urban residential low with exception, to add private park as an additional permitted primary use and an institutional parking lot as an additional permitted accessory use. The amendment will also remove the site-specific exception, which is not one of the existing uses nor proposed. The proposed uses are in association with Faith Baptist Church, which is across the road at 169 West Road. The owners have noted the parking for the use is insufficient on the lot, and additional outdoor space is also needed for ongoing programming. The UR1 precinct permits residential uses such as a single detached dwelling. A private park is not listed as a permitted use, and the parking lot is an accessory use to a permitted use on the property. And without a primary use on the property, a parking lot cannot be established. Therefore, amendment is required. The property is within the built-up area of Huntsville's settlement area, and which is the main area for intensification. West Road is also designated as within the intensification corridor. New development within the urban residential intensification corridor shall generally be compact in form, such as medium and high density residential and mixed use development. The urban residential designation does not describe private parks or institutional parking. However, these uses can be considered low impact transitional uses and do not preclude future residential intensification. The character of the urban residential area is to be protected by ensuring permitted uses and densities result in compact development, And where new development is proposed and adjacent to existing development, it is to be designed in a manner that reflects existing built forms, including height, massing, and character. In this instance, residential development is not proposed, and the property has no existing development. The proposal includes site alteration to construct the parking lot, but it is intended to utilize pervious paving system and soft landscaping to maintain a natural look. And the private park use will also ensure much of the property will be maintained in a natural state and will mimic the existing character. Where new development is proposed, access roads must have capacity to accommodate any additional traffic, and a traffic study may be required where applicable. No traffic study was provided for the application, though one was requested at the pre-consultation stage. Although the proposed use is associated with the institutional use across the street, the entrances and further utilization of the property may have impacts on traffic. The property is a Class C district road in proximity to the Highway 11 corridor with surrounding commercial and institutional uses, so it is important to assess these factors and the potential change for the proposed use prior to issuing a decision. District staff reviewed the application and provided comments, which were attached in attachment 5. District staff are not opposed to the proposal, provided that a traffic impact brief and stormwater management plan are provided and implemented to the satisfaction of the district. The district engineering and public works team also advised that only one access will be permitted onto a district road. It was also noted that due to the proximity of existing crosswalks, an additional crosswalk from the property to the church would not be permitted. However, should the application be approved, district staff would require a pedestrian crossing, the one that's already there, from the school, be signalized for safety. The application was circulated internally in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act, and it should be noted that on the public notification, it did only say that it was an institutional parking lot. It didn't note the private park. However, this was shown on the website and on the proposed site plan. The building and bylaw departments indicated that there should be a signalized crossing between the two properties or in between the school on the other side of the road, which is already being utilized by the church. Operations staff also noted that pedestrian safety should be addressed with the potential upgrades to the Goldie Street and West Road crossing, and a signalized crossing may be considered to enhance safety for users of the parking lot. A single access is also recommended to mitigate potential instances with traffic. And a comprehensive stormwater management plan was also required by the town's operations staff. The property is also within the Ministry of Transportation's permit control area, and they have commented that a permit would be needed for any development. As there are items that still need to be addressed, such as the traffic impact brief and stormwater management plan, staff are unable to make a recommendation for this application. Therefore, this report is being presented for information only. Thank you so much, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much. I'll call on the applicant or representative to make any comments. Oh, live and in person. Boy.
Good afternoon, members of council. Here on behalf of Faith Baptist Church, Graham Heisinger of Tulloch Engineering, 80 Main Street West, P1H 1W9, Huntsville, Ontario. Here with Russ from the church, as well as my colleague Ted Maurer, who prepared the conceptual site plan and drainage plan that you have been circulated. I think perhaps just to dial back to the impetus of this whole process was that in a few years ago, the church was experiencing rapidly increasing attendance, which is great to hear. They were finding, however, that they were running out of space on their property to accommodate all those new folks wanting to attend services and functions at the church. People who live in the area right now can attest to the fact that on Sunday mornings and when special events are being held at the church, that nearby streets will fill up. Even across the street, Goldie Street, there might be some street parking for folks trying to access the facility. as well as the Pine Glen School. There's kind of an informal agreement between Pine Glen and the church right now to allow folks attending the church to park at the school parking lot. So that's wonderful that they have that agreement, but the church was looking to formalize something a little more concrete and permanent. So they, of course, initiated the purchase of this property. I'm sure we can all remember what that property looked like prior to the acquisition by the church. So even just cleaning it up and tearing down that ramshackle house is quite a bit of an improvement, in my opinion. Yeah, so the off-site parking currently occurs across West Road at Pine Glen School and also on the surrounding side streets. The need for additional parking would be accommodated by the proposed parking lot through discussion with staff. It was determined that a site-specific amendment to the bylaw would be needed to accommodate that use and to ensure that this property was not simply considered to be used as a parking lot. There's connotations that come with that. We also worked out between staff and ourselves a wording or an arrangement for the property wherein the property could be used as a private park as well. And that certainly fits with the intent of the church. I'm sure many of you have driven past and seen that right now the kiddos are over there for the summer camp and occasionally for recess, because some of the students from the Muskoka Christian School are being housed there at the moment. Something like that would be something that you would expect to see longer term on the property, fairly low impact development, and certainly not something that's out of character with the neighborhood, as Kelsey mentioned in her report. And that's an important consideration as well, because it is certainly acknowledged that West Road is an intensification corridor. Town policies have indicated that we'd like to see higher density residential development along these intensification corridors. That certainly makes sense from a planning perspective. And although that's not being proposed here today, the work that is being proposed here today and the resultant use of this property would be very easy to repurpose and rectify if a future owner of that property ever decided to build a residential project on the property. We're essentially talking about installation of porous pavers and some very passive uses on the property. So it would essentially be a development parcel, shovel-ready almost, if the church ever decided to divest themselves of that property and a developer expressed interest in constructing a residential component there. So I think that's an important consideration. Of course, the parking lot will consolidate the existing parking and traffic issue on the one property as opposed to at Pine Glen and in the surrounding community. The park itself, which will kind of be situated to the north of the parking area, although the distinction will be blurry from the street because we're proposing a porous paver system that will essentially look like a grass field when you look at it from the street. The park itself could be used for church events or events hosted by the church, but not necessarily run by them. As we all know, the church accommodates many community organizations and community events. So although staff have recommended that today we're just here to talk about this for information only, and I certainly appreciate that perspective, I would like to open up a discussion, hopefully at council here, to discuss approving the use. And this kind of goes back to what my colleague Mr. Gallagher was talking about with Dr. Hill's property there. Although the plan has been prepared, at least in a preliminary state, what we're talking about here today is the ability to permit the use to occur on the property through this site-specific amendment. And so there will certainly be an opportunity to address the concerns that have been raised, or I shouldn't call them concerns, but requests for additional information that have been raised by staff at the town and district level regarding parking and stormwater. It would certainly give the church some assurance to go ahead and commit funding to those additional studies and that additional information to provide to the town and the district if the use would be approved today or prior to those studies being commissioned. So I just wanted to put that out there, and hopefully there's some discussion in that regard. And I do believe through discussion with staff that those studies, even if this application is approved today, could be requested and accommodated by way of future community planning permit at the point where the lot is ready to be redeveloped. Alternatively, as we just did with the last agenda item, the site-specific exception could include reference to development not proceeding until a site-specific community planning permit that addresses those items is provided to the satisfaction of the town and the district. So yeah, I just wanted to open that item up for discussion, hopefully, with council, and I'm happy to hear your thoughts and answer any questions. And I do believe Russ from the church might want to make a brief statement as well. Yeah, so thank you for your time.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Russ Buckerfield. I'm the chair of the Elders Board. I want to thank you for hearing our plea tonight. And just to mention that we are a growing congregation, as already been said. We do have a parking problem. It's only getting worse. And we do want to be good community partners. We don't want to irritate the community by parking in front of driveways and causing frustration. So again, any consideration to this application is certainly appreciated from our end, and I'm sure from the community surrounding us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any members of the public that would like to speak to this application?
Chair Stone, I see no hands raised.
All right. Councillor Fitzgerald first.
Thank you, Chair Stone, and I'm happy to see this application come forward. There's one, I guess, small negative impact that, there's potential for some housing there. But to see a church with increasing congregation numbers, and especially a church that its members provide so much back to this community in giving and caring and sharing. So I can certainly support this. And as far as going forward with zoning or approvals, I don't know how we do that, or if we want to do that. I look forward to more discussion.
All right. Councillor Cloutier.
Thank you, Chair. I fully agree with this parking lot. It's greatly needed. I actually had to work one day at the school on a Sunday morning, and it was kind of, wow, it was crazy. But the biggest thing I think we got to take in fact here before we even put the cart before the horse here is that crosswalk. I think you take 83 spots, 4 people a car, that's extra people going across right away. I know you do have the volume coming right now from the school and out Goldie Street, but I would like to see something done with the crosswalk right first thing before we do anything. Because, that's the big thing, because if we don't upgrade that crosswalk, we're going to get people not using the crosswalk and they're going to cross in front by the church. And it's a 4-lane road, very busy road. It's hectic there. And I think we should key in on the crosswalk first and then go from there.
Then
And who pays for fix the crosswalk?
Well, so that's a great question. We know it's a district road. Who's responsible? And do we, should we ask for that to be done before any work is done? I don't know. Who has an answer to that? Kelsey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, so part of bringing it for information only, this was circulated to the district, and this was kind of brought up, that the potential of upgrading the crosswalk, making it better not only for the church and for this use, but for the entire community, is that we'd be able to have those discussions before there was a decision made on this, so we could figure out that whole aspect of financing. Yeah, so there is no plan as of right now, and we could have that conversation following this meeting about how that would proceed.
All right, fair enough. Follow up?
Yeah, just to follow, I think this is going to go through. I can't see anything stopping it. So that's why I'm kind of pushing, maybe if we can bring something to the district on an ASAP basis to start on the crosswalk. If we can at some point. I don't know how it all works, but that's just a thought.
All right. Thank you. Deputy Mayor Armour.
Thanks, Chair Stone. Mine was along the same angle, but I see it's already in the district report saying that they have to be upgraded. My curiosity, how are you going to get people to walk up the road and not walk across the road? So I think that's probably going to be, so maybe addressing some hash marks there or something. So I did think there's just more conversation to be made there for sure.
Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chair Stone. As we all know, this property's had been an eyesore for many, many years. So I always remember, you could drive by, it was overgrown with grass, had an old home on it with broken out windows, a lot of vandalism occurring. So when the church purchased the property, they've cleaned the site up, improved the property, the grass is cut. You drive by, it looks good. And it's been greatly improved. So I'm just wondering if, just putting it out there, but if we couldn't, I don't know why we couldn't consider approving it conditional on some of the items that have been addressed here today, such as the crosswalk, and planning department mentioned a few outstanding issues as far as traffic brief and those type of things. I'm just wondering if that's a possibility at all, rather than tying this application up any further.
Kelsey, do you want to speak to?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. As this application is an amendment, it can't be conditioned, but however, we have drafted language for something within the exception to address those. It doesn't speak to the crosswalk in particular, so if you had anything further you'd like to clarify in the exception, or maybe Director Maxwell would like to speak to that.
Director Maxwell?
Thank you, Chair Stone. I think council perhaps wants to be a little cautious of the fact that if we do approve the a bylaw to move forward, there might still be other changes that have to happen to address the traffic issues and the concerns raised by the district and by our own operations team. So I would be hesitant moving forward with it without having that preliminary review done, because to my knowledge, and Kelsey can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe there was any traffic information submitted specifically, because MTO, also because it's in their permit control area, there might be other things that need to be addressed by them as well. So.
Councillor Renwick.
Thank you, Chair Stone. And I would concur with the director that we need to wait to have those, even the traffic brief, as well as the stormwater runoff. But I was very pleased to hear, and I did speak to the gentleman prior to this meeting, but just to say that the fact that they're using the interlocking brick, I think that's a really great, because I'd hate to think that you're going to pave over such a beautiful piece of property. But the interlocking brick allows a lot of the stormwater to run off, which I think is great. And visually, when you drive by, it doesn't look like a parking lot, it looks like it's a grass field. And I'll just be open to say that I do live around the corner on Hunters Bay, and that on Sundays, I've seen the traffic there, so I'm very pleased to see that they're going to have another place to park. But I would be willing to put this on, it is for information only, but I would prefer to have the traffic brief done, as well as I think it was the stormwater runoff, the study done, before we approve this.
Right, and you're referring to permeable paving, I think is what it's called.
That's correct, yeah.
Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Chair Stone. I concur with Councillor Renwick, and I can't imagine, I think we all approve of the change in the land use. I think it's a great proposal, great application. But, there are these outstanding items that have been identified by the district and everyone around the table. And I think in a way, if you go ahead and approve the land use and then the actual application changes and it has to come back, that would be a bit silly too. So my question would be, how quickly could the application come back for final approval?
Kelsey?
Thank you for the question, through you, Mr. Chair. With studies, it's kind of difficult because it's on the consultant's timeline, and then the applicants, and then our own. But we're able to review things, and it would be the district reviewing them. So it's hard to put a timeline to it, but they would have to do these studies anyways. So that timeline would be associated with any work, whether it's approved or not. Yeah, so it doesn't have it's not a huge inhibiting factor.
Thanks. Councillor Morrison.
Thank you, Chair Stone, and through you. Like Councillor Fitzgerald, the only negative is that maybe it won't be developed fully, but I know when it was listed before, I had a client looking to put storage units on there, which would have been horrible. So this is much better than that. And it looks so good now compared to what it used to look like. The positive is that that crosswalk will be enhanced, which I think is great. It'll help out. I think it's a no-brainer. So I hope, to Graham's point, if you can read the tea leaves, I don't think you're going to get much resistance from us as far as supporting the church in this initiative, because it makes so much sense. The only thing I asked, you brought up potentially housing down the road. With the changes, would it still allow, let's say down the road, the church wants to maybe recoup some funds and they wanted to sell a back part of the land to be developed, would they still be allowed to do that? I just want to give them as much leeway on that stuff as possible, because obviously we want housing.
Great, thank you for the question, through you, Mr. Chair. So in part of our discussions prior to this application coming forward, we discussed like how there was to be a site-specific exception or the zoning changed or precinct changed. So we decided to go forward with an exception because it's still residential, one with an exception. So it keeps the integrity of it being a residential property with these kind of transitional uses. But they could come forward with a future application and it would be in keeping with the urban residential OP designation and residential precinct. But if it was a higher density thing, it might require an amendment. Yeah.
Deputy Mayor Ermer.
Thanks, Chair Stone. Just a quick comment. I know that the new residential build to the north, Bernauer Management, I think, is building it. They're in full support of it. So I was speaking to them last night, and they wanted me to make sure that was mentioned at the meeting.
All right, I see no other hands, so this is for information only. Very quickly.
Ted Maurer with Tulloch Engineering, and thanks for hearing the application here today. But just, Mr. Chair, Council, I just wanted to speak quickly about the crosswalk and the stormwater management. Of course, we fully support looking at additional studies to show the warrant to that. With the crosswalk, keeping in mind our use during events and church use are usually opposite school use. So we have a number of kids that would use that crosswalk during the day now. There's a blinking light there. It's a well established crosswalk. Our church members and when we use the field now with Muskoka Christian School, we've made it a point to talk to the elders board, and they've addressed making sure that they use the crosswalk. So we're well aware of those preconditions. When we do use it, though, it's opposite to the school. So to put your mind at ease, I do agree that a traffic impact study as well as a crosswalk warrant, lighting warrant study would be part of that to give back to staff and council, just at ease of whether this additional signalization will be warranted there. But again, keeping in mind the type of use that we're proposing and that would affect that crosswalk. So I think right now we might find that some additional lighting, but I don't think it's a big thing, money-wise too. That and the parking lot as well. We, being good community members, we want to try and landscape that and keep it as green as possible. So just wanted to interject on that. So thanks so much.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. All right. Before we leave the public portion of our meeting, can I ask Richard to come back? We're going to have that housekeeping amendment motion come back to the table. Thanks, Kelsey. So why don't I read this motion and then we can talk about it. Moved by Councillor Fitzgerald, seconded by Councillor Clark. Be it resolved that staff be directed to initiate a community planning permit bylaw amendment to revise the CN rail yard, and pit study provisions in sections 1.13.1, 2.22, 2.25 of the community planning permit bylaw 2022-97 as amended to address mandatory technical study requirements. Councillor Renwick.
Thank you, Chair Stone. And through you, did the amendment not talk about the quarries as well? It was just the pit that we were concerned about. It didn't mention quarry. No?
Said pit study provisions? Richard, could you comment?
I can't remember the exact wording. It did reference the section 2.22, which deals with pits and quarries, but perhaps we could just add the word and quarries in if it helps.
Any other comments? Do we feel a need to add quarries? We're fine? All right. I think staff have heard what we're looking for anyway. Are you fine? All right. Councillor Morrison.
Just trying to remember the conversation because it was a while ago. Was there not a third thing brought up, like Mr. Gallagher brought up section 2, or is that part of what we're already discussing between quarries and? Is that part of it? That's addressed here. Okay, I just remember 3 separate conversations. Want to make sure we got it all. Okay, that's great.
Richard?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, you are correct. He was referring to 2 different sections, but we captured both sections to review in this resolution.
All right, I see no other hands. You've heard the motion. All in favor? And that carries. All right, now that all comments have been received, I declare these public meetings respecting the above applications to be concluded. We'll now move to the non-public portion of the meeting. And Kelsey's back to speak to the bitter end.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, the subject property is located at 542 The Bitter End. The property is within the waterfront designation in the official plan, and the property is within the waterfront residential 120-meter precinct with a natural constraint 2 overlay. The application has been submitted for a Class 3 CPP to recognize the existing non-complying dock and boathouse. Relief is needed to increase the boathouse projection from 15 meters to 15.3 meters and increase the dock projection from 15 meters to 16.9 meters. The increased projection, and I just highlighted here, the increased projection of the boathouse and dock are not visually different than the complying structures, as the increased projections are limited to a small portion in the center of the structures, with both ends of the dock and boathouse remaining in compliance with the permitted projections. The recognition is considered appropriate and technical in nature. The shoreline has several large boulders, which resulted in the dock and boathouse being shifted slightly to the west from the planned location during construction. Although the design of this boathouse and dock did not change, the shift resulted in the increased projection as the shoreline dips further into the property behind the as-built locations of the structures. So you could see here, it's just these small portions of the dock and then the boathouse, which are non-complying. Section B, 318 of the official plan speaks to buildings and structures or works extending beyond the normal or controlled high water mark or located at a shoreline located at the shoreline, and them being designed in a manner that addresses navigation, fish habitat, the flow of water, potential damage from flooding and ice heaving, the natural landscape and terrain, narrow water constraints, and privacy and views as a result of projection further into the lake. Section B 3110 also speaks to boathouses extending beyond what is permitted in the community planning permit bylaw, that they should generally not be permitted. In this case, it's a small portion of the boathouse and dock, which is beyond the 15 meters permitted. As it is a small area of the overall structure and shoreline development, a wide portion of Skeleton Lake, it does not result in any adverse impacts to the shoreline and the hydrological functions of the surrounding environment. The application was circulated in accordance with the provisions of the Community Planning Permit and the Planning Act and to the Skeleton Lake Association. District comments were provided and they had no objection to the application. Through staff's review and analysis, the application would appear to conform with the intent of the official plan and the provincial policy statement. Therefore, staff are recommending provisional approval. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Kelsey. I'll call on the applicant to speak to it, or there's a representative.
Savas Radis, Plan Muskoka. I don't really have much to add. It really just is the shoreline behind it dips, and when you project that line out, it just clips the center of that thing. It was unfortunate because they, as Kelsey mentioned, they shifted the building as they were constructing it because of some boulders. And when you run a tape measure to the end, each corner of the dock, it complies. But they never expected when the survey came back with that surveyed shoreline that would actually result in that little pit in the middle that would actually be non-complying. So it's unfortunate that this application had to come in front of council for that approval. Hopefully, maybe in the future we can make this a staff approval. But I think we're okay on this one.
I agree.
Thank you.
Comments or questions from council? Excellent. Moved by Councillor Cloutier, seconded by Councillor Morrison. Be it resolved that Planning Council provisionally approve Community Planning Permit Application CPP 65 2024 HTE, the purpose and effect of which is to provide relief from subsections 2.4.5 and 2.4.6 of the Community Planning Permit Bylaw 2022-97 as amended. 2, increase the projection of a boathouse from 15 meters to 15.3 and increase the projection of a dock from 15 meters to 16.9, both to recognize the existing non-complying 202 square meter dock and a 90 square meter boathouse, conditional on the owner entering into an amending agreement with the town to be registered on title to the lands to confirm development is in accordance with the final approved site plan drawing and the accurate projections of the dock and boathouse. And further that upon the conditions of the provisional approval being fulfilled in accordance with subsection 1.17 of the CPP bylaw 2022-97 as amended, a Class 3 community planning permit be issued to authorize the above described development conditional on development being completed in accordance with conditions as listed in attachment number 5 to report DEV 2024-62 and being attached to the community planning permit. Comments or questions? All in favor? And that carries. All right. One more. Oh, thank you. Richard, you're back up for the notice of planning applications policy.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. The report before you describes a staff recommended amendment to the recently approved updated planning notification policy, which council approved last month. Unfortunately, the updated policy contained a requirement for the town to do a mail-out notice for Class 2 community planning permits, whereas the community bylaw itself does not contain that requirement. So this error, we're bringing it forward to fix. Unfortunately, this error is leading to more burden in the administration of the bylaw and didn't follow the intent of the bylaw, which was to streamline development. So we're suggesting that this aspect of the notice policy be updated to remove it. So thank you for listening, and I'd be here happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from council? I'm not seeing any. Moved by Councillor Renwick, seconded by Deputy Mayor Armour. Be it resolved that Planning Council approve the amendment to the provision of notice for planning applications and matters policy as attached to report DEV 2024-63. Comments? All in favor? And that's carried. All right. Moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Mayor Alcock. Be it resolved that confirmation bylaw 2024-60 be received and passed this 12th day of June 2024. All in favor? And that's carried. And finally, moved by Councillor Renwick, seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald, be it resolved that we do now hereby adjourn at 3:44 p.m. All in favor? It's the best one of the day.